a Superman action figure in a toy coffin, a blue shirt and red jacket, a first flight in the sun above the Arctic tundra. These are some of the moments that define my Superman fandom. Together on this podcast, we journey across time and media to examine, discover, and reconsider the creative visions that have shaped the Man of Steel. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the animated adaptation of DC's Injustice is real-life Lobo himself, Justin De Voe.
Wait. Nay, good sir. Hold on. I have a question first before we get started. You said you didn't read the books, right?
You're blowing up my spot seconds into the episode, but that's
Wait,
true.
no,
You're right.
It's important. Okay.
All right.
And I know you're a gamer or you gamed in the past, but you did not play the game, right?
Correct.
Okay. In that case, welcome to Refinding Zarnia with your fucking host, Justin De Voe, because now I get to ask you about stuff because you don't have this. Look, I'm going to own this because it's the first time that I can get on this show and be like, I might know something that he doesn't know. Because you're like in fucking page 52 on panel 4. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, how did they do this? But this time, I get to like have that, all that knowledge, and I get to find out, like, it's almost like I get to ask you questions. Because when I watched it, I had to watch it through the scope of someone who read and played everything. You have not. So to get the show started, sir, what did you think? Because I've been waiting to ask this question for like 3 weeks, dude, since it came out. I'm waiting. What did you think?
All right. You know how in a prior episode you pointed out my tell, how I will say, that being said, when a negative opinion is about to be expressed, you might hear that being said a decent bit tonight as we record.
Yes.
So,
yes. Okay, good.
All right. So here, let me say this. First of all, I agree with you about the different level of experience we have with the Injustice property. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here. The other reason is just I always have fun talking to you and I wanted to bring you back. But I have not played the video game. I'm not a gamer. The last time I played video games was PlayStation 1 era. Yeah. So I'm not a gamer. I heard great things about Injustice. I've watched the gameplay and the story trailers, but I've not played the game. And I also haven't read the comics. I've heard great things about that Tom Taylor run, but it's a lot. And it was one of those things where once I announced this podcast from the beginning, a couple people were like, oh, you got to do Injustice. You got to do Injustice. And I was like, okay, but I don't know how, because I'm not automatically going to become a gamer, and it's a lot of comics to get through. So I was actually really grateful when they announced this animated movie, because I said, well, this will be a perfect way for me to be able to experience it. But I wanted to have someone... Yes.
Until I fucking saw it. But go ahead.
But
that being said.
That being said... No, but that's why I wanted to have you on, because I was like, well, I know, you've played the games and you've read the comics, so you have that whole other frame of reference, and it'll be great to bounce off of each other. Okay. On the micro level, there was stuff that I thought worked great and stuff that I thought really didn't work in the context of the movie, and we can talk about that. But big picture, I just had a real fundamental disagreement with the movie, but I think it'll give us a lot to talk about. So what did you think?
Oof. Like, it was rough. It was rough because I played the game when the game first dropped. It was after they did DC versus Mortal Kombat, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is really cool! Like, it can be done." And then when they announced Injustice, I was like, "This is me," because I knew there was a background story to it, and I knew the people involved because it's the same Mortal Kombat dudes. I said, "This is going to be awesome." When I found out what the concept was, we had talked about stuff like Irredeemable and the Plutonian and like The Boys and like all the time where like a Superman archetype kind of flies off the handle. And I was like, oh, but this is actually Superman this time. That being said, I always try to find something, and we've had this conversation before. I always trying to find something to be like wall to wall. It was dog shit, except for this one thing. I had to really search for something to find that I was like, that was okay. Like, it was so hard, especially with, okay, first of all, there's umpteen years of this book written. No, I think it goes up to like year 6 or 7. It's been a while. Like, I had to limit my rereading to just year 1 because I figured that would be the focus, right? And I figured maybe it's a multi-parter because when I saw it, it was like an hour and 8 minutes. I'm like, huh, hour and 8 minutes. That's a lot of fucking story to tell in an hour and 8 minutes. And initially, when I saw that timestamp, I said, they're not going to do this right. They're not in that amount of time. And you got to figure you lose 8 minutes with the lead in and the credits and all the rest of that stuff. And I was like, oh man, I did not like it. And I thought you would like, I was like, all right, either he's not going to like it or he's going to like it because he doesn't have the schema that I have, or I'm viewing it through the lens of like, what the fuck did they do to this story? So I couldn't view it another way. I couldn't turn that off and turn this on and separate the two. So no, I did not like, not even maybe it's like a boring afternoon. I'll watch it. I will never watch that again. I just won't, dude. It did not do it for me at all.
Fair enough. And let me say at the outset, before we really dive in, there will be spoilers here. So if you're listening to this, you're watching this, if you haven't watched the movie or read the comics or played the games and you want to keep everything
for the movie
fresh,
and the comic, yep.
Then I guess come back to this episode in the future. But so that's your spoiler warning. And for anyone who either doesn't care about spoilers or just wants a quick refresher, right? Injustice is the story of basically, like you said, this evil Superman trope where the Joker manipulates Superman into killing Lois and also detonates a nuclear weapon that obliterates Metropolis, including 11
attached
million
to
people.
her heart.
Yes, once her heart stops. Yep.
Right.
And Superman, in response, kills the Joker and positions himself as this authoritarian world leader. The various DCU heroes sort of split into different camps, and we go from there. So
it's the regime and the insurgency. Like that's, at least in the comic, that's how it was pinned. And it was cool to see them separate, like who went with who. In the viewing, I did that wasn't, it just wasn't as complex as it was in the story, especially the Robin Nightwing, whatever the fuck disaster that was. Not the killing. All that stuff was in the book. All of it was in the first big chunk was lifted right out of the book. I was like, oh, maybe they are going to make it a multi-parter because it's still a lot to jam in. But it was rushed. It was disastrously rushed. You didn't get like the Superman regime foot soldiers. Instead, you got Mr. Terrific's like terrific balls, like doing all the work. Again, because I looked at it in two different ways, I'm like, why? Why is this happening? Like, and to bring in like a Ra's al Ghul Deus Ex Machina where he's like, I secretly want to take over the fucking world. I'm like, where did you come from? Like, why is this happening? So it wasn't even a super. To me, it was less of a Superman taking a power position story of just like other people pulling the strings. And the only person that really did that in the book, which I eventually want to get into, is Diana. I love her role in the book, did not like her role in this at all. They are two completely different Dianas. So yeah, dude, I was like, maybe like the Plastic Man stuff was like the saving grace for comedy. But other than that, I was like, this is really rough to watch. Like I paused it a couple times. I'm like, can I do something else? Like paint a wall or something? It was a tough watch.
Yeah. The thing that was kind of heartbreaking about it for me was that it had me for the first chunk of the movie and then it lost me. And that's what made this especially disappointing. There's so much to unpack. I agree with you about Wonder Woman. In the context of the movie, to this viewer, she comes across as a bloodthirsty enabler at best and just an opportunist at worst. It's like, this is her chance to get Superman. And that's really the way it plays. And it's unfortunate.
No. That is the point that I wanted to try and make. She is worse in the comic. You think she was bad there? She had a moment of redemption at the end where she's like, we can't do this. No. She didn't do that in the book at all. If anything, I saw that as she's always like, I'm going to pose with kids and look at me and look at this girl I saved from she's always an Amazon from start to finish. Every time in every book, like the Master Race 3 and all, like when she gets the opportunity to go unhinged in Flashpoint, she's like, fuck this, I'm taking over everything. Like this isn't worth my time. So I always saw her as unhinged but controlled in the face of Clark, who they always had this little love thing back and forth. It's like Lois and then her and then Lois and her, and it always goes back and forth. In the book, she is a a dark whisper on his shoulder in every scene. And the way it's drawn, when he's around her, he's very solemn, very solemn. In this one, you don't really get that. And again, at one point, the thing that in the cartoon that I didn't like, or one of the many things in the cartoon I didn't like, is she went in, she's like, whose side do you want? And Arthur's like, fuck this. I'm going back to Atlantis. You guys have no control over this. I'm out. And he pimps out. That's it. He leaves. In the comic, they go to battle first. And then they lift Atlantis out of the water and put it in a fucking desert. And he's like, how about now? Are you going to listen now? Because he put everyone, and that, again, Diana engineered all. So when Clark tells Diana, go talk to Arthur, she goes talk to him. She feeds him a whole bunch of shit and she comes back. When she gets back, they have their conversation and Clark goes, did Arthur say anything? And Arthur did. He's like, how's he doing? He seems really bad. He's unhinged. Like, dude, tell him this. We're friends, blah, blah, blah. And the scene is him asking how she's doing. There's a zoom up on Diana's face. She goes, no, he didn't say nothing. She does that the entire book, dude. It's awesome. It's awesome because you can see the different switch when Clark is talking to people by himself and when she's there. So the part that you didn't like was the part I did like, but I didn't like it because it wasn't as drastic as it was in the book.
Gotcha. Okay. No. That does make sense. You know, so you've hit on something now a couple of times that I think has been a common criticism of this animated adaptation. The fact that they had so much material to try, and it was a vain attempt, I suppose, to boil it down to this hour and change. The thing that's frustrating to me about that is DC Animation, or Warner Brothers Animation, has been down this road before, and it really seemed like they had learned their lesson. You know, the first couple of direct-to-DVD animated adaptations that they did, you know, when they first started this over a decade ago, was, you know, they did The Death of Superman in an exceedingly truncated version. It was just Superman Doomsday, and it cut out the replacement Superman and most of Funeral for a Friend, and most fans were let down. And then they did New Frontier, you know, this magnum opus of Darwin Cook, and they again just really cut it down. Now, I actually didn't mind. I thought some of the choices that they made in that worked, and Darwin Cook was, I believe he wrote the screenplay for that, so I think that helped. But you know, we now gotten to the point where when we do The Dark Knight Returns, it's a two-parter. When they redid The Death of Superman, they did it as two movies. So it's an odd choice to me. So you thought
they made the turn and they would do this the right way, and they didn't do this big swing in a mid, like it wasn't even a foul tip. Like the bat never left the shoulder in this one. And I was like you, the first part of the movie, I was like, this is tracking exactly how it is. Like Clark's like, I want you to be the Godfather. And he's like, oh shit, like this is going to be awesome. And then there's a bunch of really sweet exchanges between like Clark and Lois that are even in the book over the course of the book to make you recognize or remember why the fuck he's like this in the first place. And they lifted that shit out too. And I was just like, and I felt the same way. Doing Injustice multi-parter, people were seething for this thing. They wanted this animated movie. Like the trailer was viewed a whole bunch of times, and the parts that they showed in the trailer were almost lifted from the book. Like it was a lot of like you know, he goes to Arkham and fucks everybody up. Solomon Grundy's bought in a little bit differently. But I was like, oh my God, like they're gonna do this right. And probably about 1/4 of the way through, I just went, I have no idea what the fuck is going on anymore. I didn't, to quote Bernie, someone needed to be open hand slapped. Like that was just like, and the dude who wrote this is also the dude who's written a whole bunch of other of these like DC adapted to screen. I think he did like Apocalypse and he did some other stuff or whatever, but it was the same dude. And it was just like, they just wanted to put it out, but they did not respect the source material at all outside of the first 15 minutes, which I was like, this is going to be good because he flies her up the same way, sees it's doomsday, the ticker thing. He lays waste to millions of people in Metropolis. I was like, awesome. Now we have the thing. But then you lose it with all of these side plots that didn't even have to be in there. They didn't. Like Nightwing becomes fucking Dead Man. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? To make up with Damian? Why? Why does that have to be in there? You don't need that. You don't need that.
So that was not from the comics?
maybe in one of the later, because again, I reread year one, so that made sense. No, he's dead, and that's it. Bruce carries him out in the same way, blames Damian. They go at it, which I think Nightwing shows back up again in the later years, because I know he's in the
Okay.
the comic is different because the comic starts from now. Like they tell you the story in like the opening, but that starts like post year one, where like the war is already going on.
Okay. Because Deadwing, as he is called, is
Oh my God.
probably the dumbest thing that I've
I
seen.
love everything about you. Dude, I said the same thing. I was like, I swear to God, if we don't see eye to eye on this, I'm gonna have like an offline conversation. Be like, are you okay?
No, no,
Like,
no.
do we need to talk about this?
No,
Oh
I'm
my
with you.
God.
Deadwing was about the dumbest thing I've ever seen in at least in one of these movies. But the thing that was
Yeah.
especially baffling to me was the movie. It just stopped the movie dead in its tracks. And I
Yeah.
watched it twice, and both times it took me so out of it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I hope it's from the comics, because it's like, otherwise it's a baffling choice to begin with, but I would be the teeniest bit more okay with it if there was at least a basis for it. And for some reason they felt like we have to honor this part of the material.
Yeah.
But
No, I
yeah,
did not remember. I know Nightwing is in the game. And from what I understand, maybe Deadman was like a DLC. But again, I reread year one, but I think I read the series when it came out. Like Hunter was probably still in diapers. So we're talking a couple of years ago. Um, and I didn't want to come in with that much info, because then, it becomes more about the comic and not more about the animated series. But no, that was terrible. I was just like, why is that in there? Like, there's just no reason for that to be in there at all. And there's a bunch of shit that was like that, where I was just like, okay, well, what are you trying to use filler? You don't need filler. You have like 7 years worth of material to work off of.
yeah. So let me say this. And also, do you mind just taking down your headphone volume just like a teeny tiny bit? Because I'm hearing myself very little
Yeah.
bit on your end. Just your headphones. Thank you. So here's the thing that I think is kind of fascinating about this. You and I both basically had the same reaction as far as what was missing. And on your end, it's like what's in the source material. I didn't, but I still had the same problems with it. And so, for example, when the heroes split, I'm actually still hearing myself on your end. Sorry, just the earbuds. I guess if those can come down just a little bit. Thank you.
Mess with that. Dude, I'm so used to Riverside. I'm like, I don't even know where the hell
Yes,
to find that.
well, for any other podcasters out there, it's especially in this remote era, there are all these different platforms that the various podcasters use. So we're on Ecamm right now. That's what I use. But Riverside is another one I've played around with. StreamYard's another one. In any event, I'm not hearing it now, so I think we should be good.
Yeah, I just turned down the whole thing, so we should be okay.
Perfect, thank you. So, but that's the thing. So when the heroes split, for example, and Arthur is just like, I'm out, and we never see him again. And Hal Jordan is like, okay, the Guardians are calling all the Green Lanterns back to Oa. We're out. The thing about that was, it's like, well, if those characters stay, these are the heavy hitters. Now we have a real conflict. And so it just, even without knowing the source material, it felt like something's missing. I'll give another example, because this one really, as a Superman fan and as a Smallville fan, this one really bugged me. So, when the government is trying to, corral Superman, they go after Pa Kent. And they abduct him, and they rough him up.
Speak your piece, because I'm going to tell you how that's different. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So they pick him up, they rough him up, they burn the farm. You really, you're angry, on behalf of Clark for them, going after Pa in that way. And, Superman is able to track him down, but we don't actually see the rescue. And we don't get an actual conversation between Superman and Pa Kent until, again, spoiler alert, Pa is dying in Superman's arms in the fortress when Ollie fires an arrow at Superman, and he deflects it and inadvertently directs it towards Jonathan. And as Jonathan's dying, he says, Clark, forgive them. And the thing that really pissed me off about this, I felt something in that moment, because I'm a lifelong Superman fan, and I have this history between these two characters, but the movie gave you none of it. And so that moment to me felt so cheap. And if we had, if we had seen him rescue Pa earlier, if we had gotten Pa's thoughts on any of this at any point in the movie, I
You
would have bought
do.
into that moment more. It
Yep.
really bothered me,
You
and I just felt like it was missing.
Yeah. Yeah, you do heavy in the book. And okay, so just to give you an idea, they go in, and I love the way the government taught. There's a quote that I thought I had, that's why I was scrolling through it. The way that they bitch out Superman from a governmental standpoint, they're like, get, you know what? Get in your cape, fly around, punch some aliens, but leave the government stuff to us. I thought that was cool because it was like, oh man, like that really shows that, like, a la like Vought International from The Boys, like they don't run shit. Like they got like one job. They pose for pictures and stuff. Like that part I really liked. But Ma and Pa Kent were both in the farmhouse. They were sleeping. And they bust in, and Pa went out like a bitch in the cartoon. When they walked in, Pa, like he's built like he is in the cartoon, just a big, like, I throw hay forever. I'm like that kind of dude. He punches one of the government officials in the face, like breaks his helmet and his mask. Like he's not fucking around. He was like, dude, you're in my fucking house. And then you keep scanning back to them, and Ma and Pa and Jor-El add their input.
Oh,
They all say, what are you doing? And he flies away, and he's like, I'm not listening to any of this shit. I got a job to do. And it was like, but you see, like, oh, and Lex plays a part in the comic too.
right.
He's the one who's building that little pill that makes them stronger. And like
Gotcha.
Clark hugs him because after Metropolis gets destroyed, like he finds Lex and give him the hug. He's like, "Oh, my best friend," and like they're best friends apparently, like in this universe, which I have another fucking whole ball of wax because they call it Earth 22, which is the Kingdom Come Earth. And I was like, "What the fuck? Like that was supposed to be like an Easter egg for people?" But Ma Kent and Lex Luthor have a great exchange where Ma's like, deep down inside, Clark's just a scared little boy. And Lex Luthor's like, Superman's a scared little boy. And it's just a zoom up of her. And she goes, aren't we all? I was like, and that spoke to like what was going on in the world that's built in the comic that they fucking lifted all that emotional stuff that you were just talking about. Although they went right to the action, right to the action. They built a fucking time travel machine, bought in another Superman, and then a pregnant Lois. I was like, what the fuck is, dude? It just felt like you put a whole bunch of ideas in a blender and fucked it all up and spilled it all over the floor. And we're like, we're gonna pick this, that. So like all that emotion between Ma, Pa, and Jor-El, none of it's there, none of it. And I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's really disappointing. I feel like, and I know obviously Superman's my favorite character. This is a Superman podcast. I know I'm biased, but at the same time, the story is Superman's arc. So I feel like the movie, at least, especially if they were limited to that runtime, I think the
Yep.
movie suffered by not focusing it even more squarely on Superman. He is the
Yeah.
focal point, but the Bat family gets a lot of play. And
Yes.
yes, that relationship between Superman and Batman is important, but it went too far. And like all the Dick and Damian stuff, I would have taken that right out, and you focus more on Superman and his characters. And then I think
You
you
had
solve at least
to,
some of these issues.
because then it makes sense. And again, it's like you don't need to focus on. The book splits it. There's an insurgency section and a regime section. You get both of that back and forth. You get the insurgency hiding, and you share the idea because the book is more about like the split. Like, yes, it's a Superman story because he's the one that sets it all off, but it focuses more on the split between the two. This one was sold as a Superman goes berserk, and
Right.
then they just kind of slam you in the face with like, well, yeah, but that's what we told you, but this is what's actually going on. And it's just like a bunch of unneeded crap that was thrown in that kind of ruins everything. And to be honest with you, the little stuff from the book I missed, like Harley Quinn plays a big part in the book through multiple years. And the one thing I liked, her comedic thing is she's got this fucking fake mustache, and every time she puts it up, everyone's like, "Why the fuck you have a fake mustache?" She's like, "Why should?" Or the real question is, "Why are you asking why I have one?" And it makes Ollie laugh, and the whole joke about the quiver is in there, which I thought was really cool. But again, that was in that first chunk. Like it seems like they followed it for us, for people that have seen it, or people that were just interested in it for the first quarter of the film, and then just went, went completely AWOL, where it's just like all that stuff, all the powerful stuff is lifted out, and then they try to like rope you back in with a pregnant fucking Lois at the end. Like, come on, man, don't do that, don't do that, because that's not how you stay true to the fact that she's dead. He could look at her and be like, "You're not my fucking Lois." And then the whole thing just folds out. Dude, it was such a loss of memory. I don't even remember how the cartoon ended. I remember parts that I didn't like, but it was so forgettable that I'm like, wait, did she talk him down at the end? Did they kick him into that thing? Like, I completely forgot. I completely forgot.
It felt to me, and I watched it twice, and I just rewatched it last night, very anticlimactic to me, where, yes, the pregnant Lois from another reality talks him down. He expresses remorse. He says, how did it get this far? He's like, I deserve to die. And Bruce is like, no, you don't get off that easy. We're going to create a Red Sun prison for you, and we'll let you out when we need you. And he's like, that won't be necessary. Like, I'll stay wherever you put me. And he flies off, and then Bruce kisses Selena, and that's how and it ends on that, which...
So it's a Batman story.
I think ultimately it's a Batman story. Now, that Batman actually... story. So this speaks to, I think, the larger, like, more fundamental philosophical problem that I had with this whole thing. So, first of all, and this is kind of taking even a step back, generally speaking, historically, as a comic book fan, I've never been all that big on Elseworld stories. I don't object to them.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and I've read my fair share, don't get me wrong, and there are ones that I've liked. And I 100% get why people like them. And I don't object to them, and I don't begrudge their existence or anyone's enjoyment. It's just, I don't tend to love them all that much. And then when we conflate that, not just with Elseworlds, but also this evil Superman trope, you know, you take something, and I know you're a big Red Sun fan, and you and I are going to do a Red Sun episode in the future. And you know what? When I read that years ago, I did like it. But the thing that I always kind of come back to, and I say this somewhat facetiously, but it's like, I don't know how much it really says about the character when you do a story like Red Sun or The Dark Side, where, you know, Superman was raised by Darkseid. It's like, you'll never guess what happens if he was raised by Darkseid. It's like, oh, would he be evil? It's like, yeah. It's like, well, what else would happen? I mean, you know, we understand the character. We know how important his upbringing was. So it's like, yes, when he's raised by communists, he'll be the Russian Superman. When he's raised by Darkseid, he'll be a Darkseid minion.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's like, yes, I think to an extent it's fun to see the character repositioned in that different context, but I don't know how much it really says about the character. Now, in fairness, it doesn't really need to say anything. It could just be a fun alternate take, but I've never been that drawn to it. Now, that being said, but this is a positive, you know, something like Injustice on paper or Kingdom Come, something like that I'm more on board with, because that's not, oh, he was raised by someone else. We're basically following our Superman to a point, and then something's going to happen, specifically Lois's murder, and then he's going to go down one of these paths. And that kind of gets interesting. As far as the evil Superman aspect, I don't mind so much when it's truly an alt, you know, it's a character based on Superman, like Homelander in The Boys. It's like, nah, that works, and definitely in the world of that show, like, that's perfect. But as far as Superman himself going evil, that's not something that really resonates with me all that much. And where my heart broke with this story, and again, I guess this is, and you'll tell me, I mean, I don't think this is really even a deviation from the game or the comics, but I wish that it had not been so clear that Superman was in the wrong, because Joker is responsible for the death of Lois and Clark's unborn child and Metropolis.
And millions of Metropolis people, like millions of people.
Yeah. And so when Superman shoves his arm through Joker's chest, it didn't feel like, oh God, he's gone. Or for me, at least, it didn't feel like, oh, he's gone too far. It's like, nope, this is justified. And when we get into these larger questions, and we've talked about this on the podcast, it's like, what would, or what should Superman use like, how much should Superman insert himself into world affairs? And I think there really is an argument to be made that it's like, look, I have the power to turn the tide. I have the power to force a worldwide ceasefire, and I'm going to exercise that power. Right. That to me is interesting, and there's a valid point of view there, and you can have more of a back and forth. And we had that for a certain point, you know, for a certain part of the movie. But then once we get to the scene where he slaughters the teenage partiers who are worshiping the Joker.
Dressed up like the Joker, yeah.
At that point, it's just like, okay, like clearly he's gone too far. And
But you
that
don't
to me
see
made it
that
less interesting.
progression. He just gets mad.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
you
that's
don't
a
see
problem too.
yeah, like you don't see a progression into madness like you do in the book. Like he's just like, you fucking guys can't do this. And then laser beams the entire place. Like, what the fuck? Like in the equivalent in the book is there's this kid from I think like Australia. Like they fly to Australia and there's this kid named Galaxor. And he was like, I'll stop you. And they literally like break him. Like they beat him to death and they break him. And you find out later that like that dude actually took like a picture with them at some point, and he just wanted to be a superhero. Like he wanted to be just like them, and he wanted to be the person that stops them. Because it's not because what he's doing isn't right. So you see the aspects of like what you're doing isn't right from the perspective of other people. And in this one, I still don't see an evil Superman in either one. I don't see it in the book, and I didn't, or I tried not to see it in the animated version. I see a you could have, and the point that I will make because comic books and people have made this forever was Superman could be like, the Joker's your fucking fault. Every time you lock him up, he gets the fuck back out again. And this is why this happened. Fine, I will give you that. But would he freak out and maybe kill all of the bad guys in Arkham? Sure. But then the part that you don't get is after he does a bunch of these things, like he's sitting in the watchtower and like he's kneeling down and you hear like all like the word bubbles of the news and he is breaking slowly. In this one, it's like, boom, I'm done. Take over the world. Stop doing this. Stop doing that. And you don't get the descent into no, now I need to do this. Now I need to do this. Now I need to do this. In this one, it's just like it's just there. Like he goes from fine to like ballistic. And we know Superman. You know Superman better than anybody I fucking know. He wouldn't go like that and there would be a lot of battle, there'd be a lot of back and forth. It would be, we got to work something out, Bruce. Me and you have to work this out, which you see in the book. In this one, he's just like, oh, you killed Lois, fuck everybody. Like he's not gonna do that. He's not gonna do that. Like he could. He's like, no, stop doing that. Stop doing this. I'm going to catch all these missiles. I'm going to have people blow shit out of the sky. We're not doing it anymore. Shame on you. Shame on you. But would he take it to this extreme? That's where I think the Elseworlds kind of version thing comes into play. Because maybe he would try to control everything, but I want to see more of the mental breakdown by himself when dealing with this shit. And you didn't get that. You got him and Mr. Terrific playing chess, which in the book, it wasn't him, it was the Flash.
Okay.
And it was a whole like, so what are we going to do? Outlaw cars? Check, mate. So what are we going to do? Do this, do that? And like that back and forth is so much better in the story, dude. So much better. And I think that's why I didn't like it so much, because you had such a cool level, this multi-tiered level of like breakdown, and we're not going to do this. And he pretty much brings in a Gestapo. Like there's no balls to follow people around. At least in year one, there wasn't. Where it was like, yeah, I think they found people, but he brings in like a straight jet. And in one of the scenes, they're goose stepping. Like it is clear what Superman is becoming, but he doesn't become it like that. He wouldn't. At least I don't think, like, do you think that he would just like snap and be like, nope, that's it. Fuck everybody.
No, I mean, that's the thing. And, it's funny when you compare this with something like Kingdom Come, where, which I'll be covering early next year on the podcast. And I haven't gone back to that in decades. I'm really excited to revisit that one. But, the idea that he would, fully retain who he is and just sort of retreat to the farm, like in Kingdom Come, it's like, I don't know. The idea that he would put that arm through Joker, like, I buy that.
I buy that.
Honestly, buy 100%. That. And
100%.
That's where I think, the movie was successful in tracking his journey to that point. But beyond that, we needed a lot more. And because, again, without that, what we ended up with was, I think, a very rushed, at least, but just a very superficial evil Superman story. And again, I just think there was a more interesting way to do it that could have gotten into these larger questions about how he should use his power. And to your point, that if we did get to that point of him slaughtering the kids, that it happened in a way where, okay, probably not going to still be root. Because again, when he kills Joker, it's like, I'm there with him. I don't think I would ever be there with him in killing those kids, but at least you would have more of an understanding of how he got to that point. Now let's put a pin in this for just a second. We'll do a quick commercial break and then we'll continue. But you know what? Instead of me playing the commercial for your stuff, you just want to do it? Do you want to plug your stuff now? Yeah, do it. Go for it.
That'd be awesome. So I write macronutrient numbers and weightlifting numbers for people. I got a couple certifications, and people like to overcharge for stuff like that. Meanwhile, it's really easy. Like you could just get someone's total daily expenditure and their BMR, and you work them up something that personalizes, works for them. And the best part about macro stuff is like I give you your proteins, carbs, and your fats a day, and you can eat whatever you want as long as you're eating within those numbers. My buddy Rob, who's on Shadadigans, lost like 25 pounds, like 4.5 inches off his waist in like 12 weeks. And he's like, how is this working? Like, I don't understand how this, like, if I'm still, at one point, he's like, I went out and had cake. I'm like, did you make room for the cake? He's like, yeah. He's like, I had enough room for this cake. So you can still eat what you want. Like, if I gave you a thing where it's like, oh, you gotta have salmon every night, you're gonna fucking hate salmon in the first 3 days. So it works for everybody. The only reason it doesn't work is if you don't follow the programming. It's like anything else. The only discipline is to follow those numbers. But otherwise, I mean, like, I haven't had anybody fail. But normally some people stay for like 12 weeks and they're like, you know what? I think I'm getting this. I could do it on their own. So like if you fish for a man, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish and that shit like that. And it's like, that's what I do for people. And some people stay because their goal changes. Like, oh, it's bulking season. I got to bulk up and stuff like that. Yeah, but it's at Iron and Honor Fitness. I teamed up with my coach, Robbie Guns. So he does workouts for people. I do macros for people. We give you a tracker and everything. I annoy you every day if that's what you want. And we make magic happen and shit like that. And like I said, if you're a short-term goal person or long-term goal person, dude, look at me. I started 247 pounds with a 41-inch waist after I got COVID. And now 188 with a 30.5-inch waist. And I eat 2 chocolate chip pancakes a night at 9 o'clock. So please do not believe any of those tropes. Don't believe like anything that someone's trying to sell you. Just do it right, and I guarantee stuff will happen. So endorsed by me.
And I mean, if you want to see the results of all of Justin's labors, check out Real Life Lobo on Instagram as well. And not only can you see the fitness journey, but you can see his insane Lobo cosplay. So I hope you'll check that all out, along with the Shadadigans podcast. And I mean, really, thank you for being one of our sponsors. I really do appreciate it. Let's hear about a couple of our others, and then we will continue our very passionate discussion of Injustice. We'll be right back. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. All right, and we're back. Let me share something that I did enjoy about this. Okay. And, again, as far as where the credit goes, maybe this comes more from the comics, but I really did appreciate how much love for the DCU and various, characters and dynamics and various aspects that kind of all came together. And a couple of the examples that I think of are, with the Joker's plan, the fact that he is splicing the Scarecrow's fear toxin with kryptonite. Something like that shows like, okay, like this is someone thinking about the larger picture of the DCU and kind of how these things fit together. And then similarly, when they're assaulting the fortress to try to get Superman's red sun cannon, and the atom shrinks down and enters Superman's brain with a shard of kryptonite, like stuff like that I thought was cool. Was it enough to make me love this movie? Not necessarily, but there were aspects like that where I was like, oh, like that's cool to show how this kind of all ties together.
So in the book, they're not getting a red sun cannon. They're getting the pill, I think, because that's where it's hidden. And that's when they get it. Like Ollie distracts everybody, which in the book, okay. Let's stop for a second. Captain Atom is arguably the most powerful character, at least in like as Monarch or afterwards. Like that dude can make whatever he wants. Like he could just make kryptonite. Like, and he's nuclear. So he is got Bane Superman all over the place. In the fucking cartoon, he shows up at the fortress with Captain Atom by the neck and he just drops him. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Like, you can't play out the one dude because in the book, he says, like, you know what? This is for the government. I got to do it because he still has ties because he was in the military. In the book, he's got Superman by the balls. He's like, I'm going to fly you up. I'm going to explode us both. No problem. No harm, no foul. Sorry, I got to do this. You went overboard. We can't have this. Diana sneaks up behind him and chops him in the throat, which essentially now he becomes a ticking time bomb. He's like, well, now we're all fucked. So he ends up flying up to get away from everybody, and Superman obviously survives, right? But like in the cartoon, he just has him by the neck and he drops him. I'm like, really, Captain Atom? Really? Like that dude wasn't prepared at all for a fucking fight with Superman. Like it's just shit like that. And then the kryptonite sliver after they kill um uh all right, he still has a kryptonite sliver in him. They never took it out. So why isn't he depowered? Right? A little bit of kryptonite goes a long way, doesn't it? Or am I fucking that up?
Well, I think like because when Raish puts the gas mask on Superman's face, I think the idea is that it vaporizes any foreign object in there.
Oh, so
Like
we just had to put that one together.
I think that was the intention
Okay.
behind that. But yeah, the
But
Captain Atom thing was kind of that's the thing. You know, with Captain Atom again, like you said, you don't see what goes on between the two of them. You just see the end of it. You know, Aquaman's taken off the board, the Green Lanterns are taken off the board. And so, you know, we're left with the main resistance being these primarily non-powered characters, largely the Bat family and you know, including Harley at this point and Green Arrow and you know, that's the other thing too that kind of bugged me. Like I said, and not to harp on this, but like I said, I wish that it had presented. Hey, I wish it hadn't taken Superman as far as it did and as quickly as it did, such that we could have really had more of that philosophical divide. I mean, I think the movie very clearly is presenting you a Superman who's in the wrong. And one of the ways they do that is, you know, who's on Superman's side? You know, Wonder Woman, who we've talked about, Cyborg, who, you know, as a machine doesn't really do all that much, Hawkman. You know, whereas on the other side, you have this lovable ragtag bunch. You got Plastic Man and you got Harley Quinn. It's like you clearly know the characters you're supposed to be rooting for. And like I said, I wish it had been a little bit more balanced.
yeah, and it does in the comic, and like it gets to the point where they pull in some people. One of them, oh my god, fucking course. So Lobo did not show up in the cartoon, thank God, because as always,
Yeah.
he was played right the fuck out in the comic, played right out for numerous reasons. And yes, it's an alternate world. Maybe his rules are different, but they call him in to take out Superman. He's like, look, I was paid to do this and I'm a man of my word or whatever. Superman grabs him by the jacket and starts flying towards the sun. And he's like, let's see if you can come back from this or whatever. And he puts him back down on the ground. And Lobo's like, well, you're not worth the fucking fight. I was like, guy, you're going to take away the one thing that he does? Like, he didn't try. Like, again, greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy, didn't prepare. Didn't prepare. Just said, all right. And then he's like, I'll take a job. Do you have a job for me? I'm like, what the fuck? And then he gets captured by Harley Quinn. And in 3 pages, she like gets into his brain and he starts fucking. And they drop him off in Apocalypse and he tries to kill Darkseid. It's the last time you ever save him. I was like, what the fuck? Like, why is that? And that was a problem I had with the comic. Not just because obviously you're playing out Lobo, but it's like, what does that have to be in there for? Like, you bring him in for what? Like, just as a side, like what you need to fill panel space? Um, but and again, like it's funny. I'll bring you back to when you said that fucking Superman was knocking out pilots in like the 1950s version, where he's like hauling off and he's like punching people in the face.
Yeah,
He
in the
lays
George
into
Reeves
Ollie
show.
like, yeah, he backslaps Ollie in the Fortress of Solitude. If Superman flicked you, you'd be pink mist. And the beating he lays on, like it was a very Bernie open hand back fucking slap, right? And he sends him to the ground or whatever, but like like, dude, that would liquefy you. And that was before anyone took it. Because in the comic, what was missing from this is Alfred ends up taking it. And that's how year one ends.
Huh.
And the scene with Superman and Alfred also made me mad because you could have shut it down right there. But let's stick with this. And then when we get to them being back at the Batcave, I'll go back into that.
All right. And, you know, you've mentioned Bernie a few times. Bernie, of course, Bernie Gersmeyer, one of our prior guests.
So
For anyone
funny.
who's sampling the podcast with this episode, and they're like, he keeps talking about this Bernie slap. What are you talking about?
But Bernie's a savage. He said that Damien should have been open hand slapped. I was
Yeah.
like, dude, that's G shit, dude. Like, we used to do that shit when we didn't want to fight because you just put someone in their place. I was like, I respect Bernie more for that.
The bat stuff and the dead wing of it all in
So
particular.
heavy,
it
Get the
really
dead wind thing.
well. So I mean, a couple of things. I felt that, you know, there were so many deaths, and in particular superhero deaths in the movie. You know, initially, you know, when we see the Flash get taken out in the opening minutes, when he tracks down, the Scarecrow who's been killed by the Joker gas.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh wow, like, okay, like this is the world we're playing in. But you know, there's so many of those, and the characters are, with the exception of Nightwing, I suppose, are really never mourned. So you don't, I don't know that you really feel them all that much. They, you know, the movie racks up a very high body count very quickly, but I don't know that it really has all that much impact. The thing that bothered me was we had, by my count, at least 3 accidental deaths. Yeah. You know, we have obviously Superman killing Lois. He thinks it's Doomsday, and he, you know, flies her up into the stratosphere, and her heart stops.
Which you need, or the thing doesn't go off.
Right, of course. And so that was fine. But then we have, you know, Damian throwing the baton at Nightwing's head.
And he's like, he's supposed to duck because that was played earlier.
Right.
Where he does that, yeah.
Yes. And so that kills now. Okay. And then in the fortress, we, again, like we talked about before, we have, Superman deflecting Green Arrow's arrow and killing John. And it just felt like, all right, like this is an awful lot. And maybe that just speaks to, you know, trying to show the effect of this violence and this path that the characters are on. Like, these are the consequences. But again, I just felt like moments that maybe should have been more powerful lost something, because it was just like, okay, yet another accidental death here.
Yeah. And in the book, Pa Kent doesn't die. He catches it in the shoulder. And that's why him, Martha, and Jor-El can still talk about the situation. Like, he didn't even die in year one. He just catches it in the shoulder. He's like, Clark, I'm fine. Like, you got to stop. He's like, fuck this. And he flies away, like, all pissed off and shit. And like, again, like, you have your Earth father, you have your Earth mother, which I don't know why would they pull her out of the cartoon? She's got great lines. Like, why that? They bust in, Jonathan's sleeping by himself, so we're left to, I guess, assume that Martha's dead at this point?
Yeah, I think we have to draw that conclusion. Yeah, that was interesting.
But again, why?
I don't know. You know, that really, I was thinking about that both times I watched. I mean, I can't think of other instances where Jonathan lives and Martha dies, you know, in these stories. It's, you know, it's always either they're both alive or they're both dead, or if anything, obviously Pa dies, but Ma carries on. So that was an interesting choice. But I keep going back to Deadwing because, you know, it bothered me the first time. It just felt like this is really goofy and this really feels very out of place. You know, we see him in the afterlife, you know, and he gets rechristened as Deadwing. And he's sent back. And so it just felt really out of place. But the thing that bothered me upon rewatch was, like, it didn't accomplish anything. He did two things as Deadwing. One was he briefly possessed Victor, Cyborg, when Plastic Man was breaking Mr. Terrific out of this new prison that Superman has created. And that allowed them to escape. But they could have found another way to do that. Like, that didn't really feel all that necessary. And
in
then
the book they did, yeah.
Okay. And then his other big moment is possessing Damian in fighting Raish, or Ra's al Ghul. I always go Ra's, but I know in the movie they went with Raish. But in terms of the pronunciation, the thing that bothered me is like, well, why not just possess Ra's unless he's just so powerful that he can't be possessed? But I felt like in that moment, when he's possessing Damian, we hear their conversation in Damian's mind, and they're able to achieve some closure and some peace, right, and forgiveness. But I felt like that could have been achieved with Damian imagining that, or remembering a conversation with Dick and drawing inspiration from it. The idea that Dick has literally become, again, the equivalent of the DC Deadman character. Yeah. It just, and again, if this were a series, if they did an Injustice animated series, or they did a multi-part movie,
Oh,
or this
so
movie were
good, dude.
2.5 hours,
Yep.
it's like, okay, knock yourself out with all that stuff.
Yeah.
But with the limited real estate that they had, that just, it really bugged me. And, and this is the last thing I'll say about Deadwing, because I don't, but
No, please don't, because that was a huge problem.
But the other thing that like really got me was the scene before Deadwing is what I thought really was a powerful moment of Bruce breaking down in the Batcave. Selina
Yeah.
goes to him and she's like, just don't be the mask for tonight. Like, let yourself fall apart.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. And it was a very powerful, and you felt his grief and you hear
Yep.
him
Right
sobbing,
out of
and
the
it's
book.
like,
Yep.
it's like, wow, right. And then to go from that, I just felt like it just like let all the air out of that balloon
Yeah.
to then go to the Deadwing stuff.
Yeah.
I just was very, very out of place to me.
Yeah. Well, Clark goes to talk to Selena in a sewer, which she finds because it's lead line. She's like, he'll never find me down here. And turns out he always fucking knew. So he goes down there and he's like, listen, like, you don't understand why we're doing, like, I have to do this. But he also asks about Bruce and Bruce's well being. And the underlying thing that plays this whole time is she's like, you want to go after someone, go after like the government who's like doing all of this stuff. Like, you don't have to go after regular people. Like, you keep going after regular people. Like, why don't you go after the people pulling the strings? So there's a lot of like governmental conspiracy that they lifted right out of this, assuming that I guess they thought they didn't need it. But then by doing that, you also lift the one-on-ones that Clark has with people when Wonder Woman's not around. And
Yes.
those play so hard when you realize that, like, oh, he's putting on airs for her. It's got nothing to, like, yeah, I'm sure it's got something to do with him, but every time he's with her, even in the panels, his face is different. And then the one thing in the book that's not in the animated version, remember when he gets up and he's doing his initial speech about how like he needs to depower everybody?
Mm-hmm.
In the comic, it shows he's reading off a teleprompter. They didn't show that in this. And I was like, Clark wouldn't read off a teleprompter. He would speak from the heart in a situation like that. But in one panel, they show his whole speech on a teleprompter. I was like, oh, yes. And that plays up the government control thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, he might say to power everything, but he's just becoming a larger government at this point.
Right.
Yeah, but reading off the teleprompter was a really big, like, and again, for someone like me and you, who's like the why always has to be there, like, it's just not there. It's just not there. He's just pissed.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I did like the scene where he goes to Catwoman in the movie because it showed the humanity is still there. He still
Yep.
cares. I like that. But going back to the address to the United Nations, it brought me right back to Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Okay.
It's just amazing to me because I genuinely think, and like I said, we've talked about this. We did a whole episode on, what the morality and the ethical duty of Superman would be if he existed.
Right.
And I feel like it is a very interesting question. It's like, should he use his powers in a more proactive way than he does?
Right.
Superman is very reactive and he's not inserting himself in global affairs. But it's like, should he? He has the power. Should he take it upon himself? And, again, at the end of the day, I think it would be a betrayal of the core of the character if he did. But it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
But it's yeah.
And it's also brought up in both mediums. Like when like the Mirror Master Task Force comes in, he's like, play your little games, fight your aliens and shit like that, but you got to leave this stuff to the professionals. So all that's played in where it's like, yeah, maybe he should do something, but he's not because other people are pulling all the strings. So like, would he do it? I don't know. If Joker killed Lois, oh yeah, dude, he'd punch him right through the fucking chest like he did. Would it then lead to killing a whole bunch of kids in a factory? No. I think that he would float outside the factory and have like either a singular discussion or like Catwoman be on a thing. Like he would talk to her about it, but I don't think he would nuke all those people. I think that was just ridiculous.
No, I agree.
To force you to be like, he's angry. Like,
Right.
bitch, we get why he's angry. Like, we get that part. But now you're like ham feeding us on like a silver platter, like more plot devices of why he's angry. Like, you can't fucking do that, dude. Like, you just can't. Like, let us kind of pull it together. And like you said, it should have been a miniseries. There's no way it should have been standalone. Red Sun, when done as a cartoon, played beautifully.
Yeah.
Played beautifully. It was a single like standalone graphic novel. You told it all from start to finish, except for the weird time thing that they threw at the end, which obviously we'll get to.
Gotcha.
But I thought that played beautifully. as a cartoon. I was like, they did that right. This they did not. They just didn't do it right. I
Yeah,
don't know why they even did. Like, I'm telling you, man. Looking back at it, I was like, I don't even know why they did it. I don't.
it's funny on the Blu-ray they have it's like a 15 or 20-minute special feature with the film's writer, director, and two producers sitting around and congratulating themselves on what a great job they did. At a certain point, I turned it off because I had already watched it once and I was about to watch it again, and I was like, I don't agree with a lot of this. The thing is that I feel like, we watching Superman through this, even in the beginning part where, I think a lot of us would be on his side that Joker needs to die for this. You
Oh, I
recognize,
always thought Batman was wrong about that. And I
right?
know he's got the I don't kill thing, fine. But he's responsible for thousands, millions, whatever it is, of deaths every time he breaks out of fucking Arkham. Like, yes, I can see, and that scene plays in both, where he's like, you let this madman out every time, and he keeps doing this. Why didn't you do something more? Like, why didn't you
Yeah.
do something more? And then Batman's always come back as like, we're not judge, jury, and executioner. Like, the system needs to take care of that or whatever. And again, it plays into the whole governmental thing. So like I said, and they've also had Superman like flying to Gotham during like the earthquake. He's like, I'll
Yeah.
fix all this shit right now. And turns out people are like, fuck you, get out of here. And he flies back. He's like, there's nothing I can do about these people. Because I
Well,
don't think he would do that.
well, that's the thing, because I think there are stories, and one of the ones I talked about previously was Superman: Peace on Earth by Paul Dini and Alex Ross, and that's a beautiful story where Superman tries to take on world hunger, and you see
Yeah.
throughout the story that, as well intentioned as he is, and as much as that seems like something people would be on board with no matter what, he encountered resistance. He encountered these
Yeah.
warlords and dictators and various
Mhm.
issues that made him see that maybe the true purpose he can serve is as the farmer's son who's like teaching people how to grow their crops.
Yeah.
It's very, and also spreading the word as a reporter through his
Yeah.
editorial. So, I think there are really interesting ways to tell it. The two things that I want to just jump back to, one is, again, in the beginning, even though we're still kind of with Superman, you clearly recognize this is a person who's been traumatized, who hasn't dealt with their grief. So I feel like there was still enough to mine without taking him so far
Mhm.
into the evil Superman trope.
Yes.
And then the other thing, what I was going to say about the United Nations, in both Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, when he's like, I'm rounding up the world's nuclear weapons, and
And
here when
throws
he's
him
like,
into
there's going to
the.
be a global ceasefire.
Yeah.
And in both instances, all these UN reps erupt in applause.
Yeah.
And it's like, that would not happen unless they were that scared, which is not how these scenes play.
Yeah.
So it's just very odd it just feels like such an unrealistic response.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect to it. But going back to Batman, I know you're a Kevin Smith guy. Did you read Batman Cacophony?
Yeah.
Okay. So I talked about this on a Patreon episode months ago. So not a ton of people heard this, but I recently read that 3-issue miniseries featuring Onomatopoeia, the villain that he had created for his Green Arrow
Bang.
run.
Yeah.
Right. Very cool villain. I was not the biggest fan of Cacophony, but there's a scene in particular, spoilers, but the book's been out for many years, where Onomatopoeia, in order to escape, he, Batman, and Joker are on a rooftop, and he needs to get away, and he shoots the Joker, predicting accurately, as it turns out, that Batman, rather than catch this serial killer who has eluded him, that Batman would stay and make sure that the Joker didn't die.
Yeah.
And reading that, it bothered me so much. It's like, what the hell kind of choice is this?
Mhm.
And what is that saying? I mean, it's one thing if he won't coldly execute him. It's one thing
Right.
if he won't kill him in the heat of battle. But the
But like, to
idea,
not just to let him die, they figured that'd be an easy fucking decision.
that's it drives me. That's why I loved it at the end of, and I know this was controversial at the time, but I always loved at the end of Batman Begins when he's on the train with Ra's and he's like, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. And he floats away. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yep.
yes.
And although I had the splash panel hanging up, that was always my issue with the end of Killing Joke. Always. With the whole laughing, are they laughing? Is he choking him? The reflection off the water. But clearly, neither one of them are there at the end when the cops come. Like, why? And I think in one of the Kevin Smith, it might have not been Cacophony, but in one of them, Joker's in the hospital, drawn by Walt Flanagan. He's like, you can't, like, we, and again, they've said this over the years. He's like, you can't, like, you need me. Like, I am to you. And they play it in the Lego movie where the Lego Joker's like, what do you mean you don't love me? Right. And there's a whole thing. And I know Kevin Smith plays up a lot of homoeroticism when like Joker's up against the tree and he turns around. He's like, do what you always wanted to do to me and blah, 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 blah. I think that plays as someone who reads Batman, though. Like, maybe there's a part of Bruce that's like, you're right, I do. Like, he might not ever admit it, but he's like, I'd rather just keep catching you and instead of putting an end to this. It's almost like a weird Stockholm syndrome, right? Where he's like, now he's like, I do need you. Well, like, because without you, which is bullshit. Like, without you, I don't have anything. He's got Court of the Owls. He's got everybody else. He could have went anywhere. But I think that's where we have to suspend our disbelief into the point where, yeah, he could have just let him die. We're like, well, someone else did my fucking job for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to always go back into it and save him, as Clark, I'd be pissed too. Like, if I put myself in the red tights and the red underwear and shit like that, like of Batman, I'd be like, yo, that shit is your fault. Like, that's fucked up. Like, and he didn't even do it to your city. He did it to mine. So, and that's your fault. Yeah. That whole first part, I can see that shit. And then in the comic, he breaks Batman's back a la the same way he did for Bane. And
I
Batman's kind of laying there.
I did see
Yeah.
that in scrolling through it, even though I didn't read all the comics, but or any all of the. I didn't read any of the comics.
Yeah.
It was scrolling
And
through, and I
that's
did see
where,
that. Yeah.
and that's where you miss the best part of year one, because Clark's face after he breaks Bruce's back is like, fuck. Like, I really did go too far. And Alfred, the goddamn goat, comes down and he's like, Master Clark. And he stands up and he's like, he's about to be apologetic. And Alfred headbutts him in the fucking face and blood flies all over the place. And then Alfred's like, he's like, leave my family alone. And he's laying like he's flattening Superman's face because Alfred took the pill, or word led to, like, you don't see it happening, but that's who, because then he picks up Batman like Batman weighs nothing and pimps off. And I think that's how the way year one ends. But my problem with that, why stop? Why stop punching him? He's just going to get the fuck back up and keep doing it. Why not you just kill him? But then you deal with Diana and she's worse. I'm telling you, in the book, dude, just read year one and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, Ares shows up in year one and they kick the shit out of him too. And as they're walking away, Ares is like, this is the Union I was always afraid of, because she's looking for a reason to become unhinged, and him being unhinged is exactly why she's been around for all these years. And I do like the way that played out, because you can make the argument that the only reason that she's been kind and I'm going to pose for pictures and shit like that is because she has this affinity for Clark, whether it's one day we're going to take over the world, or I just respect the fact that he's strong, I'm the top dog, he's the top dog, we're always going to have this kind of thing going on. But that plays so much better in the book, dude, because then when they bring Earth 9 or Earth, well, so they say Earth 9, which, if memory served me correctly, was Harvey Dent, right? And he was called the Superman of like Earth, and he didn't look anything like him. And then he's like, no, I'm Earth 1, you guys. And he's like, well, what Earth 3? And he's like 22. I don't get, dude, I'm just so confused by like everything that took place.
Yeah, the bringing in of the alternate versions, my understanding from the game, at least, right, is that that's where a lot of the battles and the fighting come from, right? Like, they bring
Yes.
in counterparts from other
Yep.
realities. But
From different realities.
and it's like, I think in the context of the game that makes sense. Here, him fighting like, quote unquote, our Superman, the good Superman, I don't feel that really added anything other than just more action in another battle. But it didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that was a misstep. And then, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on the Lois of it all, right? So he meets a pregnant Lois from another reality whose Clark died fighting Brainiac. So he's a Superman without a Lois. She's a Lois without a Superman. And she's pregnant and just about to pop. So this is what his Lois would have been like if she hadn't died. And I feel like, to an extent, it works, this idea that, like, okay, this is enough to snap him out of it. But at the same time, it still feels like it happens way too fast. Like, I don't feel like there's enough there.
Yeah. Yep. If they went off the source material and that ended the series of flicks, sure. But like I said, an hour and 8-minute runtime for years of a story establishment, And again, I wanted to ask you because maybe I was like, maybe he viewed it differently because he didn't know source material. But you have the same issue that I had with it, and I read it. It still felt rushed. It felt rushed. A bunch of parts felt unnecessary. Actually, weirdly enough, the parts that felt unnecessary were some of the parts that were pulled from the book. Because at that point, you're like, they're telling a completely fucking different story. Like when he throws the baton on Nightwing, that doesn't kill him. That knocks him over, and he falls on a rock, a la $1 Million Baby, and that's how he
Okay,
dies.
gotcha.
But it seemed like the parts from the book got in the way because you weren't telling that story anymore. You
Right.
just weren't telling that fucking story. And they kill Black Adam and shit like that. Like they go crazy in the book. Yeah, I don't know. It just felt like, and the Deadwing thing was just like, I'm out. I'm out. Like as soon as that happened, I'm like, I'm out. Because that was just like the icing on the cake, which came 25 minutes into the movie where I was just like, oh no, 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 no. Like we're not gonna do this, dude. And it was painful to watch the rest. It was just painful. And then when they bought, which I do think an unhinged Superman would beat a normal like fucking Truth, Justice, and a fucking Better Tomorrow Superman. Like he would, because he's got nothing to lose. He's like, well, fuck you. I'm just gonna fucking trash you, which is essentially what happened. Um, but again, like when you don't stretch out something this good and you add in elements that are just ridiculous, you get what they got. And I knew we were in trouble when I downloaded it and I saw the rating, and the rating was 2.5 stars. So a bunch
Mm.
of people already watched it and they were like, what the fuck did I just watch? And because I imagine a bunch of them were watching it through the lens of knowing the book and knowing the source material, but you watched it and you didn't have that knowledge. You still didn't like it.
And and again, and not to dump on it, but I do feel like the fact that we, both landed on the same issues, I think speaks to some fundamental problems there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I will say that the idea of this underwater prison was interesting to me, and I do feel like again, you can only take it so far in the comics and other stories because it's like you have to have stories, right? So yes, of course, the
Yeah.
villains have to escape from Arkham so they can terrorize Gotham, but that part was kind of, it's like, yeah, well, that would make sense. Like, why don't you put them someplace where they
Yeah.
really can't escape? And if they do, there's nowhere for them to go. So I thought that was clever. But you know what really drove me nuts? When we find out it's this underwater prison, and I think it's Bruce or one of those characters who's like, there's only one person like who can help us get Mr. Terrific out. I'm like, oh, like Aquaman's gonna come back, right? And it's like, it's like if ever there were a place to work Aquaman in. Though I will say, and I know you alluded to this earlier, I did enjoy their take on Plastic Man. I thought he was kind of an
So
unsung
did I.
hero of this. That I
So did I.
liked. Yeah.
So did I. And um, the underwater prison thing was cool, but what you didn't see was when um they're in Arkham and they're like, let them all out because we're gonna put them in a different prison. The villains, like at one point, Calendar Man's like, no one remembers me. Like it's like the villains are so used to this song and dance, this back and forth, that they're not even doing it for recognition of like how a serial killer would. They want to be remembered by the heroes. Like they're so fucking dejected by this. And what the fuck? Can I just throw this out there? So, not only do villains who have killed multiple people have a bar called the World's End, but the heroes know where it is and just let them rock the fuck out the whole time. Like, at one point, Diana's like, I know where Mirror Master is. And they go there, like, Cheetah's there and the Riddler's there, and like, everyone's there. Like, you can't just bust that fucking place up. Like, you don't. Like, why? Like, why didn't you do that? Like, why don't you go in and be like, yo, I know you guys all just broke out of Arkham together. We're all going back. But, like, I don't know. Just shit like that. It was like, and then I had a problem with both of them. I'm like, why does that fucking place exist?
I know it's like if ever there were a place for Superman to cut loose with the heat vision, it's like it's there. It's there, not the kids
Oh
partying.
my God, that's a great point. Holy shit, I didn't even think about that. You got a
Yeah.
problem with the people that helped the Joker do this, or we're assuming that they helped the Joker do, or knew about it at least. Instead, you fry a whole bunch of misguided jerk offs, which we see all the time. But instead, you don't go to the world's end and lay waste to every fucking bad guy in there. You were there. You walked through the fucking front door. You saw them all there when you snatched up the Mirror Master. So it's like, why not there? Like again, the beats just didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense. It should have said directed by Joss Whedon at the end. Like at that point, like that's what I expected to see.
Again, as far as other positives, overall I liked the opening scene with Lois and Clark. It was,
So did I.
it's tough. I mean, it's manipulative. Like they give him this, and again, it happens in such a short amount of time. It's like, it would have been devastating enough to lose Lois, but it's like they give you the kid, the unborn child on top of it. So they're really twisting it there. But clearly, they had such little room to work with. But I felt like in just those couple of minutes, that one scene, really showed their dynamic and just who Clark is. And so I appreciated that. I will also say that Jimmy Olsen's death was just from a staging standpoint, like was real. That was pretty effective when we see the bullet come through the camera.
Yeah. But the one thing that was pulled out, which I hated that they did, was there's a flashback scene in the book where Superman fixes a kid's bike rim, and he tries to do it with brute force, and he ends up fucking it up even worse. And then the kid goes, he's like, "No, Mom, Superman help me. He flew me home and shit like that." And the mom's like, "Yeah, whatever." She's like this disheveled waitress or whatever. And then Superman shows back up for dinner and he apologizes about the bike, almost to say like you can't solve everything with brute force. And even that in the book, it says like, "Oh, I see what they're doing." Right? Like that's your foreshadowing to like your idea is not going to work. You can't strong arm people into doing stuff because then you get a room full of people dressed in Joker masks because you told them not to do it. And I know that you want to, like, look, I understand we don't want to, as we know in the current climate, we told people what to do because it was best for them and they made every reason not to fucking do it. So the bike thing, and the kid ends up keeping the bike like it flashes forward like 10, 20 years or whatever, and he still has the bent bike. Where it's just like, and Superman's like, fuck. He's like, I guess you can't do everything like this. Anyway, what's for dinner? And that to me was a Clark moment. And then the exchanges with Lois and Clark are great because she was like, I toppled a dictator. I forgot what it actually was. And she's like, so what was your problem? He's like, kid on a bike. And like, that's the kind of banter that you want to see. Like, that's the kind of, because you want to build that togetherness. Yes, everyone that's watched the cartoon knows Lois and Clark are destined to be together, right? But show more of that. Show more of that because then maybe we would feel slightly more sympathetic for an unhinged Clark. For people, let's just say they never read a comic book before and this was their intro, they'd be like, no, I'm not doing it. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to read the book because now they're going to think that the book plays closer to the flick did, and it just didn't. Dude, there was so much like heartfelt togetherness with Clark and Lois that was lifted that you needed in this in order to make it make sense. Outside of that first scene where she's like, I'm pregnant, and he's like racing around and he's like, we need this, we need that. She's like, slow the fuck down, go do what you got to do. The problem will still be here when you get back. And it was just a beautiful fucking moment. But like we both said, first quarter of the movie was really good, or at least had promise. And then when I realized, I paused it at one point and I was like, we're 32 minutes in. There's less than like 30 minutes left. How are they going to fucking do this? And that was the first issue when I was like, oh man, this isn't going to go well. Because they're going to try and jam 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound sack.
Yeah. I mean, that Lois and Clark scene, I mean, it's great, but that has to carry a lot of the weight. And again, going back to what I said about Jonathan Kent, it's unfair when these stories, play on the fact that we know these characters and we know what they mean to each other. Because again, they really need to be able to give you that in the story they're telling. I mean, we keep coming around to the same idea. I think that for this to remain as expansive a story as they want it to be and as it is in the game and the comics, if they want it to really be a DCU or Justice League story, then it needs multiple parts or it needs to be a series. If you're going to do it as a movie, then I think it really, really, really needs to be at its heart a Superman story. And a lot of this other stuff can come away and we can follow Clark on his journey more. And, again, I keep coming back to that, the scene of him killing the kids. And again, it's like, in my ideal world, we wouldn't have even had that. I feel like it would have been interesting enough just to have him, again, killing the Joker, positioning himself in the global affairs the way that he did. Right. That's enough to spark a debate. But fair enough. This is the story they want to tell. But we need to get him there in a more nuanced, more effective way, because otherwise, then we're just playing into this evil Superman trope. And I guess the problem I
Yeah,
have with
like
that is
force
it's
fucked you into it. Yeah. Yep. That's
yeah.
exactly what it was.
And it's just that, yeah, look, I've been saying on this podcast for over a year now, I just reject this notion that Superman, in his traditional form, isn't interesting or isn't relatable. And I feel like when we resort to evil Superman, it just like further perpetuates that notion. It's like, well, how do we make him interesting? Have him
Yeah.
go crazy.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and I just it doesn't work for me.
Well, it's funny because V Ken brought that up on the Smallville one where he's like, I can't believe you watched that fucking show. No one's flying punching each other. Like, how's that relatable? And he's like, well, the parts that they add in with relationships and all that stuff, that's how you make it relatable. Like, of course, Superman's relatable. Anyone that says that he's not relatable hasn't dealt with trauma. Anyone that says that Superman's not relatable hasn't dealt with loss. Anyone that has never been in a position where they had the power to do something and didn't for a number of reasons. The only people who don't think that Superman's relatable are literally the douchebags that just want to say Superman sucks. Because other than that, the stuff that he goes through, knowing, like we said, he could solve the problem with a snap of a finger. We all know that. And most of the league would probably follow him except for Batman. So I do agree that that's the case. Because, like, Shazam could have teamed up with Black Adam at least for a set. Dude, it's magic. And I know you got a problem with fucking Superman's a version of
Mm,
magic. I love that fucking episode. But, like, and besides, Shazam has laid numerous smackdowns on Superman in many fucking comics because, like, you're dealing with outworldly magic shit, and Superman ain't got the fucking. And that's why there's a Justice League Dark. He's like, no, you guys take care of this. Like John Constantine Zatanna, you guys deal with this. He's like, this is out of my fucking league. Um, but yeah, it's just I don't know. I mean, I guess it's easy to control Billy Batson because I'm Superman, you're Shazam or whatever. You can kind of still talk him into it because he still has the brain of a kid. And you actually do see that in the comic they split because Billy's doing these interviews. Like one of the comics starts off with him doing interviews about like, oh, do you think Superman's right? And it's Billy, not in Shazam form. And some people are like, yes, we absolutely need this. Other people's like, he's just as bad as every other dictator or whatever. And then he's like, the most important interview I have to do is now. And he says Shazam. And there's like a cut between like Billy asking Shazam questions and Shazam answering them. And again, you don't get any of that. Like you don't get any of anyone else's point of view except for I'm on team A, you're on team B, break. Like that's it. Like that's it. There's no emotion. There's no relatable content. That like in this one, there's not. There's just not. It didn't make it relatable at all. Besides, oh, it killed my wife. Yeah, but you're not going to make everyone else suffer for that. Like you're
right.
not. Like you'll put a hole in the Joker and then be like, what the fuck did I just do? I need to apologize. I'm going to go float around for like a la Brandon Roth, where I'm just going to disappear for a while and then come back. But I don't think he would do what he did. I think in the comic it plays a little better because you see the progression, but in this it was just absolutely forced 100%. Ugh.
Yeah, all in all, I'm appreciative of the movie in that it allowed me to experience at least a version of the story. So I am grateful for that. It's funny; it's one of the rare instances. Most of these things, it's like I've read the comic book, source
Yeah.
material, right, and then I'm watching the adaptation. This was an instance where, I was really relying on the movie, so I'm glad that it exists. I think it was a misfire in a lot of ways. You've done a fantastic job of selling me on the comics. At the same time, I don't know. I kind of, I mean, I don't want to be so dramatic to be like, this movie just turned me off to Injustice so much, but it's like,
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, did it do that? Because
kind
I
of,
felt like it
kind
would
of.
have.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, you know what? I was really a lot of fun hearing you describe a lot of it, and I feel like
Yeah.
I experienced it through you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, you know what? Here's the thing with unlimited time, it's like, yeah, sure, I would go through the comics, but it's like, I have so much stuff that I want to cover on this show and
Yeah.
stuff that I want to read
Right.
and watch that, like, maybe if I had loved this movie, and I think if I had loved this movie, I probably would be announcing an episode on the Injustice
Right.
comics, right? Or I would say, I'm going to go buy a gaming system and I'm going to play the
Yeah.
game. And it really did not do that for me. Like, I feel like I get the idea of what it is, and I understand that there's a lot more story and a lot more nuance in the comic. Sounds really, really cool. I think I'm good. Like, I think I'm good with Injustice
If you
for now.
if you can, I will say this: don't read all 5 6 years. Get yourself year one. You ain't got to read it all in one sitting, but do the source material the justice that it deserves and read year one. I think it's like 7 issues or whatever. And it's a quick read. Like I had it
Yeah.
on I had my copy, but I had the digital reader just because like I wanted to take snapshots of certain stuff that like I wanted to remember to bring up to you. Read year one.
All right.
It won't completely remove the bad taste in your mouth because this one exists now, and it's one of those things that's not going to go back in Pandora's box. Like this piece of shit is out there. Read year one, and you'll get, actually, if you read year one, knowing you and knowing your shows and knowing your guests and knowing, you'll do an episode, if maybe not a standalone one, a Patreon one for year one, in which you could be like, now you'll really dislike the movie. Like you will really dislike the movie because the showing of Clark and what Superman has to go through is so deep in the book that someone like you who is the biggest Superman fan in terms of breaking him down, the morality, the whole thing, the death, the life, the journey, you should do yourself a favor and read year one, because once you start, you're going to be like, fuck, like I can't believe that they did what they did to this story, knowing what it could have been. So I do still recommend that you read your what. Like I know you just said I'm good. I I'm gonna say do it, dude, because I'll send it to you. I don't give a shit. I know your address. I'll just send it to you and be like,
It's
now you have to read it.
no, it is on the app. As much as I complain about stuff not
Yep.
being, it is all on the app. So no, I take your recommendation to heart. I don't know that I would do it tomorrow, but it's something I think I would circle
At some
back
point.
to. You
Yep.
know,
Yep. At some point, do it just to cleanse your palate. Because at
yeah.
this point, it's like we ate like 3 month old salmon that's been sitting in the sun. Like that's really what it feels like to me. Like they didn't do this justice. And at some point, it's like we said, at some point the writer sat around and goes, what about Deathwing? And they were like, that's a great fucking idea. Like at some point someone said, let's bring back a pregnant Lois Lane. They're like, oh my God, do it. Like, how was that a decision that you looked at and said, this is what I want to do?
Did you ever watch the '90s animated Spider-Man cartoon on Fox? I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you watched it all the way through, but in the final run of episodes, they did it was basically years before the Spider-Verse movie. They basically did that on the animated series,
Introduced
and
it, yeah.
one of the realities was an evil Peter Parker who has merged with Carnage, so it's Spider
Mhm.
Carnage. And the way that they're ultimately able to get through to this evil version of Peter Parker is by bringing a version of Uncle Ben from another reality
Mhm.
over to sort of, get through to him. So,
Yep.
even there, it's like, well, it's not even anything that we haven't seen before. So I don't know. I will say
Yeah, but you got to be at a
yeah,
breaking point to make that work. And
yeah.
that's what they missed. Yes, if you would have played it out over the course and bought that in at the end, that's like, I've gone too far. I need this one thing to bring me back down. He wasn't at rock bottom to see that. He
Oh,
wasn't.
you know what they should have done? They should have had a running bit throughout the movie where Clark starts to think of Lois and then quickly stops, or starts to look at a photo and turns it away. So like he is not
Yes.
allowing himself
Yeah.
to experience her memory, and then
Absolutely.
he is confronted with it in a very tangible way.
And
Then that would have
then
played better.
yes, and then that's the breaking. That makes sense. He just forgot all about her. Like that's why he did it, and he's like, the government. Like at that point, it's not about Lois's memory at all. It's not about Lois's memory at all. Like you forgot why you didn't she say something like that, or didn't someone say something like that in the cartoon at the end where they bring that up, where it's like Lois would want something. I don't know. Like now I gotta fucking
Well,
go
she's. I
rewatch the
mean, like
ending.
the alt Lois says to him, like, for my Clark, every life was sacred. Like,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
it not to
that's it.
you? And
Yeah.
again, that ultimately gets through to him. It's tough to. I mean, I know it's easy to say. I would have wanted more scenes of him. Avoiding the memory of Lois. I would have wanted more
Mhm.
scenes with Pa. I do recognize, they're putting out, from a business standpoint, it's like they're putting out an animated movie. There's a certain amount of action, but if you're confined to that runtime, you need a better balance. And there were plenty of dramatic Bat family
Mhm.
scenes, so there was space for it. I think it just should have been repurposed for Superman.
Yeah, like you lift out all of Deadwing
Yeah.
and you put in stuff like that. Because otherwise, I think what they try to do or what they thought, and I can't speak for execs. Like again, I know like Mike over there and stuff like that, but he ain't got anything to do with the cartoons and shit. Um, I think they were like, I don't think a Superman movie is going to track hard enough to get an audience, so we got to put in a lot of Batman stuff. Like that's honestly what I thought they did, because otherwise, there's no reason to do that. None.
Yeah. Again, even the fact that it ends on Batman kissing Selina, it's like that.
Uh-huh.
And again, I don't know if it's like, well, that's our circular ending. We started with the happy Lois and Clark, and that all fell apart, and now a new love blossoms in the DCU. I don't know, but that felt like that just fell flat to me for the ending.
Dude, the whole thing was outside of the opening scene where I was like, that's the only part they showed from the trailer too, and people were fucking losing their minds. I'm like, this is gonna be amazing. Like, this is gonna be amazing, and they're like, oh, the Red Band trailer, blah, 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 and it's a bloody fucking. It wasn't even that. Like, they showed cutscenes of Jimmy getting shot, and then Superman going into Arkham and like punching Clayface to pieces, and like just like, and you're like, oh my god, he's gonna be unhinged. Like, he wasn't even. He was a puppet, and he's a puppet in the comic, but he's a puppet for a different reason. But again, like, dude, the whole thing was flat. The whole thing was flat,
Yeah.
and I hate the fact that we disliked it so much that like even the energy is just like, why couldn't it have been better? Like, it's like two Eeyores, man. Like, that's what I feel like. I do, I do. I feel like you totally took. Ed Boon is the guy from Nether Realm, or the dude who made the game. Like, I felt like you just took all of that stuff from the people who followed the game and the book, and you're like, well, this isn't for you. Like, that's what I felt like they did. This isn't for you. Like, we're gonna draw you in with it, and you're gonna buy it and you're gonna watch it, but this isn't for you. And they didn't tell anybody that up front. And I think that's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, as disappointed as I was, I mean, I can imagine if you have that affinity for the game and or the comic, and then you watch this, and look, for anyone out there who enjoyed this, I mean, right on. I'm glad you did. I mean, I wish I
Do it
did.
and tell us
You know?
why. Because if we've talked about anything in the shows that I've been on with you, we are open to everything. Tell me why. Like, just tell me why. Like, maybe you saw something I didn't. Tell me why. But we've covered from end to end pretty much the year one book and this entire cartoon. And outside of like Plastic Man's yucks and like the quiver joke and stuff like that, like, it just didn't seem like it had a lot of saving grace unless you're a huge Batman fan.
Yeah. Or
A
you like
Batman
Justin
fan would be like, I
Hartley.
thought it was great. Yeah. Yeah.
I like Justin Hartley as Superman. I'll say that much. I enjoyed his performance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, when you have to get down to, well, the voices were really good. Like, at that point, you're scraping the bottom, dude. You're just scraping the bottom. And I was excited because they showed pieces of it at Fandom. Oh, it is going to be awesome. And it was just, I don't know, it was a giant letdown. And it's like I said, I think they just catered it to people who they knew were going to buy it and new people, because otherwise it didn't do the source material justice. And I hate saying that because then you sound like a gatekeeper, a piece of shit or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, I would be surprised if any of your listeners were like, I liked it and I read all the years and stuff like that. Like, I definitely want to hear from those people.
Yeah, I would too. And so please reach out, people. And again, I know we keep saying this, but it's like we came at it from different perspectives, but still found a lot of the same problems. Like, I don't even, and that's the thing. It's like, again, from my perspective, it's like, it's not that it didn't line up with the source material, but it's that structurally, I think there were just a lot of issues, and the pacing was like, this thing was like barreling through. There was just like so much that they
Yeah.
were just running through.
Yep. And we said that was the problem. The problem is you need to stop. You need to show him
Yeah.
more Lois. You need to show some flashbacks. You need to show more of a decline into it, because then Lois showing up at the end does make sense.
Yeah.
And he would be like, fuck it, take me away. I don't deserve any of this. But up to the point that he showed up, he's like, fuck all of you. Like, that's not a slow decline. That's literally expecting like her to show up and be like, I'm sorry. Like, that's not, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I stand by it even after talking to you. I figured maybe I find like some sort of gleaming hope in it. And I just didn't. I just didn't. It does make me want to read the comic again, like all the years that are out, because it's so much like, Hal turns into a yellow lantern and Superman goes and like pretty much decimates the Guardians and shit like that. Like, it goes deep. It goes deep, dude. Like, a bunch of people show up and they're like, yo, if Superman's taking sides, we're going to take sides too. And they bring in like an alternate Joker at one point, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, there's just so much good stuff. And it's
Interesting.
like I said, they just kind of forced it down your throat, and you're like, well, you asked for it. This is what you got.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I asked for, chocolate, and you fed me shit that looked like chocolate. Like, that's pretty much what it was.
Now, on a positive note, I want a couple of plugs. And while we're talking about Superman in animation, I recently recorded a guest spot on Superman the Animated podcast. I was asked to come on by the host, Nathan, and we talked about the season 3 episode of Superman the Animated Series, New Kids in Town. It was a lot of fun. In terms of when we're recording, when we're releasing, I don't know exactly. It might be out when you're listening to this, or it might be coming, but check out Superman the Animated podcast, and check out all the episodes, and in particular, the one that I did on New Kids in Town. It was really a lot of fun. And I recently announced on social media I'm going to be covering Superman the Animated Series with returning guest Jeremy Frutkin on this show in a huge way at the beginning of 2022. We're going to have 5 weekly episodes. I'm calling them the mixtapes because basically we're going to go through virtually the entire series, but we're going to categorize the episodes. So we'll have an episode on all the ones that deal with Krypton, and the ones that deal with the villains and the supporting cast and the new gods and the DCU team-ups. I have my Blu-ray ready to go. I'm very excited. So as far as Superman and animation in the podcasting world, there's a lot of cool stuff. Another podcast guest spot that, as of this recording, I'm about to do is an episode of the Always Hold On to Smallville podcast, hosted by Zach Moore. So he's been going through the entire series of Smallville, episode by episode. He's done such a great job with it. It's an awesome show. And so I'm on the episode talking about the season 7 episode Persona, which is one of the Bizarro episodes. So again, I don't know exactly when that's going to drop, but keep an eye out for Always Hold On to Smallville. And, we had our official commercials earlier, but I do want to give a shout out to a couple of comic shops who have been very kind to me recently in terms of helping to spread the word about this podcast. Acme Comics, led by the incomparable Lord Retail in Greensboro, North Carolina. You can check out Acme Comics on social media or on their website. They do mail order. I can't recommend them enough. And ditto for Escape Pod Comics on Long Island in New York, led by Menachem. He does, if you're interested in like comics retail generally on social media, he does these daily like state of the industry updates, and they're very interesting. And at his shop, they really do carry a very eclectic mix of books, and he does mail order as well. So check out Escape Pod Comics. And for anyone who's watched my documentary, they're both in there. So if you've watched that, you're familiar with those shops and those guys. Again, my thanks to those stores for helping to spread the word about digging for kryptonite. That was Injustice. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, so 2 things. The one thing I forgot that I would definitely want to add in, Darkseid sends Calabac to Earth, and he's like, take it over. Fuck it. Who gives a shit about him? And Calabac gets into this moment where he's like, well, because Superman beats him up, and he's like, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, you don't kill people. And then Superman flies around and like kills all the parademons, and like blood rains on everybody. And that, again, is that descent that we were looking for. And Calabac's like, you can't kill me. He's like, I'll fucking do whatever I want to send a message. So again, another reason to read year 1. And shout to not only Doug Mankey. Doug Mankey's fucking shit, dude. Like, if you've never seen that dude draw, he draws ambidextrously at the same time.
Whoa.
Yeah, dude, it's pretty nuts. He's such a good dude. Jim dude or whatever. So of course I talked to him about a little bit of everything. And I've been waiting for this moment. When I was at New York talking to VKen's like, we got to do a show together, me, you, and Anthony. I said, he can pick the topic. I don't give a shit. But having the 3 of us on a show would be fucking incredible, dude. So whatever you want to pick apart, he's like, dude, we got to do one. And I second that, sir. All so right. Whatever we want to do in the future, but I think that one would be really great too, especially because of the 3 different mindsets and shit like that. I think that'd be good. But other than that, dude, it's always such a charge and a pleasure to be here to talk to you. And like I said, I'm a real bad anxiety driver. The one I'm like Bill Burr, I listen to Pete and Sebastian, stuff like that. But to get me through trips where I can actually talk back to because I told you I do this all the time, talk back to the radio, dude. I love you, your guest, your show. And when is the Anthony and Steph show coming out? Because that's the shit that I want to hear. I've been looking for that since I guessed it with you in 2017, dude. I need that show. So you got to keep me updated on that.
That's right. Well, I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad that we can keep you company when you're on the road. Other people have said similar things, that they listen while they're doing other stuff. And, it's funny. I know I've said this before, but it's like, when I first started podcasting, I guess I had this idea of people sitting with headphones and just listening, but I actually you know, and then initially when I heard that people were using it on a commute or on a dog walk or whatever, I was like, okay, that's fine. But I've not only am I okay with that, but I love that idea of us keeping them company. And I love the idea of if people feel like they're in the room with us, then that's great. And,
Always.
you know, it's funny.
And you create that.
Well, I appreciate that, and again, but it's the guests, and it's a great mix. But it was funny because on Twitter just the other day, as of this recording, comic book writer Matt Rosenberg posted a poll about like what's the ideal length for you as a podcast listener. And you know, as you know, like most of our episodes, this is actually a relatively short one. You know, most of our episodes have been 2 hours plus in a lot of cases. And one of our listeners, shout out to the delightful Rick Reason on Twitter. He voted in the poll and he tweeted and he said that I listen to Digging for Kryptonite. He goes, most of those are in the 2 hour range, and I still want more when I'm done.
So fast,
and
dude.
Thank you very much. And because when I was first finding that these recordings were going long, I was like, oh my god, like you know, is that okay to put out an episode that long?
It's perfect. I'm telling you, 3 times cardio when cardio season rolls around, you guys. Because of how long it is, I don't think about how long I'm running or doing whatever. Second, long car rides. And when I have to dust down here, I found it apropos to listen to a comic book podcast. And this room takes me days to do. So I just keep running through them. And 3 hours is perfect. I listen to another one, 3 hours. Like I'll intentionally find in the back catalog stuff that's like 2.5, 3 hours long. Because as I'm doing this stuff, I'm like, yeah, what about that? Like I'm yelling across the room like a jackass, like you can hear me, dude. So like I said, new people, old people, you got to push this, man, because it is such a good in-depth look at everything. And the guests always like Scott with his fucking 52-page homework assignments. It's like the podcast is taken seriously enough to love and enjoy the source material, but also caters to just about everybody, man. Like you can start from any one of these episodes and be like, I want to read that book now. Like you always push that. And I think for anybody in the industry in a primary sense or a tertiary sense, like you add that to every show with everybody you bring on. So I'm just honored to be here.
Well, thank you. And I always love having you on. And to answer your question, so yes, my wife and I are going to be doing Steph and Anthony on Lois and Clark. So
can't wait.
We're going to be doing this Patreon exclusive. It'll be monthly. So this Patreon exclusive monthly podcast where we chronicle in podcast form our rewatch of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. I can't wait. I mean, I'm excited to rewatch the show. I'm excited to rewatch it with her and watch it together for the first time and talk about it. And so that'll be on Patreon at the $1 level and up. I hope people will check that out. And you know, I know we're pretty much done with Injustice, but the very last thing I want to say is that, and it always comes back to Zack Snyder's version of Superman. But you know I think we talked about it, or I talked about it when Ken was on. But you know what Snyder had planned post Justice League movie was for Darkseid to kill Lois, and for a grief-stricken Superman to succumb to the anti-life equation.
Yeah,
and I like that. I mean, look, we didn't see the movie play out, so it's like I don't know how it would have ultimately been. But in theory, I like the idea of the grief making him do something that he wouldn't do. Like he succumbs, but it's not that like he just goes evil.
No.
And I feel like that I would have enjoyed seeing something like that.
And scenes by himself, or scenes talking to Ma or Pa, or scenes with Jor-El, you would feel that. He would then go back to ruling with an iron fist, but he would have that back and forth all the time. There's no way he would just go over a deep end and not listen to those 3 people, especially listening to Diana over them. No, there's no way. There's no way.
Well, I'll say this much. I enjoy the conversation more than I enjoyed Injustice. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. Yeah. And that's one of the nice things about doing this podcast. And that's why, like, when I popped in the movie, I was looking forward to it, but I was like, you know what? Either way, it's like we'll get a great episode out of it. So it's fine, you know?
Yep, pretty much. I thought the same way.
You know, so thank you, Justin, very much. We will have you back on the show in 2022, I'm sure. Actually, we'll talk about that off mic, a couple of ideas. So we'll have you back. But thank you very much. Thank you to the audience. Always appreciate it. Make sure you tune in for the next episode. And until then, remember, it's about what you do. It's about action. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Greg Schiegel, music by Basic Printer. Join the conversation by becoming part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group. Follow Digging for Kryptonite on Instagram and Twitter, and visit flatsquirrelproductions.com to explore more of my film and podcast projects.